The Last Confession of a Hollow Man. The Debts of Shadow. The sun doesn't shine in a place like this. Not really. In the high country, the sun is just a pale, cold eye that watches you bleed and doesn't offer a lick of warmth. It bleaches the buffalo bones and blinds the men who are foolish enough to stare at the horizon for too long, searching for a salvation that isn't coming. I've spent 60 years in the saddle, 60 years breathing in the alkaline dust of a dozen different territories, and I've learned one singular bitter truth. The desert doesn't care about your soul, and the wind has no memory of your name. It's a harsh realization, one that carves lines into a man's face deeper than the dry arroyos of the staked plains. I'm sitting here now, in this cabin that smells of damp pine, gun oil, and old regrets, watching the last of the kerosene burn. The glass chimney of the lamp is stained with soot, much like my own conscience. People used to call me many things when I rode into town and the saloon went quiet. The Angel of Death, the Tall Shadow, the Bad. They weren't wrong to use those names. I've earned every one of them with a steady hand and a heart that turned to flint somewhere around the year 1865, back when the world first started burning. I've built my entire existence on the edge of a blade and the hair trigger of a Colt Navy. In this black and white world I've created for myself, there are no shades of gray, no room for the softness of mercy. There is only the quick and the dead. And tonight, I feel the weight of every man I ever sent to the latter. Do you know what it's really like to kill a man before he can even blink? It's not the poetic dance the dime novels describe to city folks back east. There's no triumphant music playing in the background. There is no slow-motion grace. It is a loud, ugly, jarring noise, a mechanical snap, followed by a puff of acrid gray smoke that stings your eyes and stays in your clothes for weeks. And then there is the silence, a heavy, suffocating silence that follows the roar of the gun. That silence is the debt. I've been paying interest on that debt for half a century, and tonight the collectors are finally at the door. I remember a man in El Paso. It was the summer of '72. The heat was so thick you could taste the copper in the air, like the tang of a penny on your tongue. He was a banker, or so the posters claimed. To me, he was just a silhouette against the glare of the noon sun, a $500 bounty, dead or alive. I caught up to him at a small dried-up creek where the mud had cracked into the shape of spider webs. He didn't have a gun. He didn't even have a pocket knife to defend himself. He just sat there, leaning against a lightning-scarred cottonwood tree, holding a crumpled letter addressed to a woman named Clara in some green, rain-soaked valley in Virginia. I didn't read the letter. I didn't care for the final words of a man who was already a ghost in my mind. I just stood there, my spurs jingling like a funeral bell, and watched his eyes as I cocked the hammer of my pistol. The sound of that click, clack, clack, felt like it echoed across the entire territory. He didn't beg for his life. He didn't scream for God. He just looked at me with a kind of profound pity. Pity for me. I pulled the trigger. The letter fell into the red mud, and the blood soaked through the paper before the water could wash the ink away. For years, I told myself it was just business, a job. But every time I close my eyes now, I see that white paper drifting away in the wind, carrying promises that would never be kept to a woman who would never know why her world went dark. They say that when a man's time is up, His life flashes before his eyes like a lightning strike over the mesas. But for a man like me, it's not my own life I see. It's the lives I cut short. I see their faces in the shadows of this room, flickering in the corner of my eye just beyond the lamplight. I see the boy in Nevada who thought he was fast because he'd practiced against fence posts and tin cans. I see the lawman in Abilene who was too honest for a town that traded in sin. They are all here tonight. They are sitting at this table with me, staring with hollow, unblinking eyes, waiting for the lantern to finally sputter and die. I've lived in black and white long before I grew old and gray. My world had no room for the vibrant colors of harvest or the golden warmth of a hearth. I chose the gray dust of the trail. I chose the cold blue of the lid. I thought that if I made myself the meanest, coldest thing in the valley, the world couldn't find a way to hurt me. I thought a gun was a shield against the passage of time. But the world is patient. It doesn't always use a bullet to take you down. It uses the quiet. It uses the long, lonely hours of a Sunday night to remind you that you are utterly, desperately alone, and that all your kills couldn't buy you a single friend to hold the shovel when you're gone. Look at these hands. They used to be steady enough to brand a calf in the middle of a thunderstorm, or hit a silver dollar thrown in the air at 50 paces. Now they shake like a leaf in a gale. It isn't fear. I outgrew the capacity for fear when I was a child hiding in the cellar during the raids. No, it's the weight, the sheer, crushing weight of the things these hands have done. Each finger feels like it's made of heavy iron. Every scar on my knuckles is a chapter in a book I wish I could burn. Every callus is a mile on a road that led to nowhere but this empty shack. I've heard the circuit riders and the preachers talk about hell. They describe pits of eternal fire and demons with pitchforks. They're wrong. Hell isn't that dramatic. Hell is much simpler. Hell is a small, cold room, a single dying lantern, and the memory of every person you ever failed, every chance you ever missed, and every kindness you ever stepped on. Hell is the realization that you had a choice at every fork in the road, and you chose the dark every single time because it was the only thing that felt familiar. I once loved a woman. Her name was Elena. She had eyes the color of the Wyoming sky just before a summer storm, the only shade of blue I ever truly cared to look at. She asked me to stay. She asked me to put my guns in a cedar trunk and pick up a plow. She wanted us to build something that grew toward the sun instead of something that bled into the dirt. I laughed at her. It was the arrogant, hollow laugh of a man who thought he was too legendary to ever grow old. I told her I wasn't built for the dirt. I was built for the wind. I rode away at dawn, the silver of my spurs jingling like 30 pieces of silver in a dead man's pocket, and I never looked back. 10 years later, I passed through her town again. I found her grave on a lonely hill overlooking the valley. It was overgrown with thistles and thorns. No one had visited it in years. I sat there for 3 days, the sun burning my skin and the wind biting my face. But I didn't cry. A man like me doesn't have tears. The desert dried them up before they could ever fall. I just sat there with a hollow space where my heart used to be, feeling the grit of the trail settle into my pores. I realized then that she was the only light I ever had, and I had blown it out myself. The lantern is dying now. The wick is charring, curling like a dying scorpion in the heat. The shadows in the corners are getting thicker, heavier, merging into one great suffocating darkness that smells of cold earth and wet wool. I can hear the horses outside now, not real horses of flesh and bone. They are the spectral mounts of the riders who come for men like me when the trail finally ends at the edge of a cliff. They don't carry saddles, and they don't leave tracks in the snow. They just wait, patient as the mountains. If anyone ever finds this place, if these words ever find an ear in the world of the living, don't waste your pity on me. I lived the life I chose. I took what I wanted. I saw the world through the notched sights of a Winchester rifle, and I paid the price in blood and eternal solitude. But if you're young, and you think the weight of a gun makes you a man, if you think the dark is a place you can call home, remember this face. Remember these eyes. They've seen every sunset from Texas to Montana, and they've found nothing but more darkness waiting on the other side. The debt is due. The account is empty. I've run out of trail, and the horses are waiting at the gate. My cigar is nothing but ash now, and my breath is slowing down to match the ticking of that old clock. I'm not going to fight it. I've spent my entire life fighting. Fighting men. Fighting the law, fighting the very ground I walked on. Now, I just want to see if the dark is as quiet as they say. I want to see if the silence finally stops the ringing in my ears. Elena, if you're out there in the light, I should have picked up the plow. I should have stayed in the garden with you. I should have been a man who planted seeds instead of a man who planted bodies. The lantern flickers. 1, 2, 3.